Welcome once again to our annual, this is the 21st Dr. Martin Luther King Day Rally in March. I want to thank everybody for coming out on this very, very cold day, but it is quite important for us to acknowledge this important federal holiday. My name is Abayomi Azikiwe. I'm with the Detroit MLK Committee, and I have my co-chair here, Aurora Harris, and we're going to be guiding you through today's program. And we want to make sure that everyone takes their seat, and we want to honor the presence of the president of the UAW, Shawn Fain, who is here. He's going to speak to us later. And we want to bring up Sarah Torres, who's going to do the land acknowledgement, and then we'll start our program. Let's have a warm welcome for Sarah Torres. She's a guitar player, songwriter, community activist. Sarah, the floor is yours.
Checking. Peace, everyone. Good to be here. Happy Martin Luther King Day. I have the privilege of doing this acknowledgement of honoring the Anishinaabe, the original peoples of this region. One way we can honor is to love the earth, to love the people, to love ourselves. I prepared a little bit this morning and thought I would speak from my heart a little bit as well. Well, and in addition, I was thinking about colonization and how it hasn't stopped on Turtle Island, which is another name for the so-called United States. For example, I'm from California. I've been able to live here in Detroit for 4 years. And I'm from Northern California, was raised there. And colonization happened in Northern California not even 200 years ago. So I bring up colonization, and I can't help but think of Palestine, because it's been almost 100 years of ongoing terror before October 7th. And so as an indigenous person here from Turtle Island, I show and try to express as much strong solidarity with the people of Palestine. And I hope that people can love themselves, love their neighbor, love the earth, and show strong solidarity with the indigenous people here and with the people in Palestine. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll have our libations by Yvonne Jones.
Today, as we commemorate Dr. Martin Luther King, the Civil Rights Movement, and the continuation of the fight for freedom in America. We also stand in solidarity with Palestine and for freedom all over the world. Libations connect our past to our presence. Knowing the price our ancestors paid to get us where we are gives us strength to continue the fight for justice and equality. We pour libations We'll make like we have a cup. We pour libations for the many people who paved the way for Dr. King and the movement, who fought with resilience, self-determination, commitment, creativity, and faith. People such as Harriet Tubman, Dred Scott, Frederick Douglass, W.E. Du Bois, Isaac Wells, Carter Woodson, Marcus Garvey, Sojourner Truth, Mary McLeod Bethune, Charles Hamilton Houston, and many more. We say Ashe, Ashe. and ashe means thank you. I call forth a spirit of resistance, resolve, unity, collective work and responsibility, fearlessness, strength, insightfulness, all exemplified in the thousands and thousands of people who fought with Dr. King and who continue to fight after his assassination. We remember the freedom riders, some of the first riders, Ralph Alpin, Captain First Bush, Kwame Ture, Benjamin Elton Cox, Israel Dresner, James Farmer, William Harvey, Jennifer Colton, John Lewis, T.T. Vivian, Charles Pearson, Joseph Kirby, and many more. We say ashe. I pour libations for the thousands of men and women who worked and stood with Rosa Parks by donating their talent, time, and money in the fight for justice and equality. We remember Georgia Gilmore, Ella Baker, Dorothy Height, Diane Nash, Shirley Chisholm, Coretta Scott King, Abraham Herschel, Mary Church Terrell, Hugh P. Newton, Chokwe Labubo, Coleman A. Young Sr., Ken Copper Sr., General Baker, Joanne Watson, Bill Goodman, and many more. We say ashe. And we remember, and to the freedom fighters like Dr. King, whose lives were taken in the fight, we remember John Brown, Harriet and Harriet Moore, Medgar Evers, Malcolm X, Jimmy Jackson, Viola Liuzzo, Edwin Goodman, Michael Schwiener, James Taney, Fred Hampton, and Mark Clark, and many others.
Rest in power, Sekou Odinga.
We say ashe. So say the name of someone who helped you to become a drum major for justice. We remember and we are resolved to be drum majors for justice. Ashe, ashe, ashe.
Thank you, Yvonne. Our next speaker to give us our welcome is the Reverend Anthony Estes.
Good morning, afternoon rather. My name is Anthony Estes. I'm the pastor of St. Matthew's and St. Joseph's Episcopal Church, and I want to welcome all of you to this powerful time of rallying together. On yesterday, I shared in a sermon that Martin Luther King Jr. in our tradition is recognized as a prophet. And in the biblical tradition, prophets primarily spoke to religious audiences. And here's what that means. It means that the church needs to be reminded of Martin Luther King's prophetic witness, to stand up for what is right because it is right, and to always marry our theology with our practice. And so your presence here today helps us remember Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., not just for his political prowess and all of the movements that he made for civil rights, but also the gift that he is to religious people, to the body of Christ, that our faith means nothing if we don't put our hands and mouths and feet on the ground to make sure that all have access to human and civil rights. So thank you again for being here. Thank you again for keeping his vision and his ministry and his work alive among us. And thank you for your presence here that reminds the church to make sure that we're not so much in here, but we're also out there as well. Have a great day, everyone, and welcome again.
Thank you, Reverend Estes. Our next person up is our very famous musician. Let's give a warm welcome to Alan Denard. He's going to do a trumpet solo of Lift Every Voice and Sing.
Good afternoon. Before I play the Black National Anthem, along with a few others, I just had a few words I wanted to say about Martin Luther King and to share with you all. It'll be quick, promise. Today we celebrate the life of Martin Luther King, a man of valor, intellect, compassion, and love. A man who knew what the cost would be in his efforts to eradicate economic disparities and social inequalities in the lives of Black Americans. His dream was a dream that believed in the possibility that all men and women, no matter the color, should be seen as equal. However, he also understood that Black Americans can't be seen as equal if they are categorized in a certain class of society. King once said, "The evils of capitalism are as real as the evils of militarism and the evils of racism." King was well aware of the blatant social discrimination of Blacks in this country, but he also knew that racism had another form that was less overt, and that form is capitalism. He was aware that capitalism creates classism, and until capitalism is destroyed, then there will always be a social hierarchy that keeps Black Americans at the bottom of the totem pole. The working class and oppressed have to be exploited in order for the middle and upper class to maintain their status. King also said, "The unemployed, poverty-stricken white man must be made to realize that he is in the very same boat with the Negro. Together, they could exert massive pressure on the government to get jobs for all. Together, they could form a grand alliance. Together, they could merge all people for the good of all." It's quite ironic that once King began talking about economic power for Blacks through the partnership with poor whites, he was assassinated shortly after. The class struggle, as King puts it, is still very much so alive and well in today's Black and brown communities in America. And as long as it's prevalent, the chance of a quality life for Black and brown Americans will always be minuscule. Poverty is the gateway to violence and the corruption of one's moral compass. Some agree with King's ideologies and some don't, but at the end of the day, you cannot deny his social impact that was achieved through love and nonviolence. There's still much work to be done. But he, along with many other social justice warriors, gave their lives in hopes of someday achieving equality for all. It is my job as a descendant of my ancestors to continue the fight for them. So long live Martin Luther King, all that fought for the oppressed, and free Palestine, peace for the Congo. Thank you. So playing the Black National Anthem with me is, or joining me is vocalist Augustus Williamson and pianist Bill Meyer. And I'm gonna do a little rendition of my own, and then Augustus will take it from there.
So you may have a seat while he does his, and I will ask you to stand when the song begins, okay? Thank you.
Good.
You all stand. We're going to sing the first verse. Lift every voice and sing. Lift every facing the rising sun of our new day. Us our child, is
Thank you. Thank you so much. And of course, that very important composition by James Weldon Johnson has been with us now for over 100 years. And up next on our program, we have a youth dance troupe, the Lachelle School of Dance, the LSO Dance Company. Let's have a warm welcome for them.
Thank you, Lachelle's School of Dance. What a wonderful presentation. Let's give it up for them one more time. Our next speaker is Piper Carter. She's an artist, community organizer, and activist. Piper Carter.
Happy Martin Luther King Day. Peace, everyone. What up, though? Only got 3 minutes to talk to y'all about environmental justice, and that's just not enough to tell you about all the injustice that's going on here in Detroit with our environment and everything else. So I'll do the best I can. First, I want to give a lot of gratitude to everyone that's been here before me. As you have seen and you know, we're here on Indigenous land, the Anishinaabe. So also want to give honor to the land where we are. We heard from our beloved elder sharing with us many of the people who passed on, right, in our libations. As you know, Detroit has a brilliant and very thriving Black radical tradition. I'm hoping that we can grow this movement because there is an attack against that energy, right? There's a very insidious attack against our very sensibilities as to, what's right and what's wrong. And what do I mean by that? I'm going to run down a couple of things. These are just a few of the things in terms of the environmental justice movement here in Detroit that I want us to pay attention to and bring us to the center of gravity on. Number one, the water crisis. If you don't know anything about the water crisis, know this much, that we are sitting on the freshest body of water in the world. Know that Nestle is raping us of our water. They're making money. Know that our politicians that are supposed to be here to protect us and serve us do not have our best interests and have sold us up the river, literally. Okay, so I don't want to get us too depressed, so I was asked to give some solutions as well as, so I'm going to give, briefly, there's a Water Affordability Act. I don't know if y'all know about that. If you don't know about that, you want to look it up, but I need us all to understand that the current Water Affordability Act that the city says that it has is not a true water affordability plan. It's a scam. It's really just to have us think that we're going to have water affordability, but it's really going to have people in a worse situation. I'm trying to be brief here, but it's so much. But in essence, Rashida Tlaib has taken a bill to the federal level that came from We the People of Detroit and a lot of other people, People's Water Board, and a lot of great people. I'm looking here, my comrades here that's all around me, part of this work. And I need us all to be like 10 toes down on this Water Affordability Act, right? I could go into, lead levels, contamination, what happens when you don't have access to water and they take your children away from you. And I could go into all of those things, but there's many places where you could research that. Another thing that I want us to center us on is Marathon is currently and has been in Southwest Detroit poisoning people for 2 decades at minimum, and is continuing to make money off our people and poison them, okay? And what they do is they say they're going to give you 16,000 jobs, but what they don't tell you is those 16,000 jobs, I'm in the church now, so I'm just going to say they don't pay you enough money because I can't use the language that I actually want to use to tell you about what's happening to us. Okay, so we know about this project that was over here on the east side, right? This plant, the Stellantis, that we fought against and said we didn't want and protested and let people know that they were polluting people and we didn't want this in our neighborhoods. Well, guess what? It's poisoning people and the neighbors are complaining that they cannot breathe. They are choking, they are dying. And we're being told that these 16,000 jobs are what the city needs. Another project, there's so many I could go on and on and on. I gotta wrap this up. So I'll be brief and I'm gonna try to land the plane like right around here somewhere. I do come from a long tradition of Black radical activists that have been here working in labor. Shouts out to League of Revolutionary Black Workers and my uncle Baba Ibn Pori Pitts, Ashe. And the Martin Luther King that I learned about growing up in the 70s was the revolutionary Martin Luther King that did not tolerate what is going on, and that the nonviolent tactics that were used was to mobilize thousands of people. But know that the violent acts that are happening against us are ungodly. They're ungodly. And know that the war in Palestine is not a religious war. It's capitalist oppression. And they're trying to sell us on an idea that two people are against each other. But you know, and I know that this is a rerun because we're living it. Just like they murdered the indigenous people to replace them with the Black laborers to create this project called the United States. They stole the land from the Palestinian people and want to tell y'all that that's Israel. And that is not a favorable thing to say in a church. But it is a fact. And so when we're standing here and we want to say that we honor Martin Luther King, I want to also honor Coretta Scott King, because she was not just his side piece. She did not just prop him up. She was also an activist in her own right. And you want to talk about the Poor People's Campaign that is continuing to this day. There is a current Poor People's Campaign that you can get involved in, and I know the Baker Center was involved in it. And I know there are plenty of ways that you could jump into this fight. But I just want to say this. There's community benefits agreements that they don't want us to have access to. They have hoodwinked us to make us think there's actual community benefits. But know that your politicians are telling these corporations that the people of Detroit ruined this city because these Negroes were too stupid and don't know how to govern themselves. And I'm going to name some names that Dan Gilbert created a press release from a New York PR company and put that around the world, and Time Magazine and all these other publications picked that up. And that's why people are coming to Detroit, because it's very easy to come here and buy land and do your little project and poison people in our neighborhoods. But we're not going to stand for that, because we're standing in revolutionary love of Martin Luther King Jr. And that's the legacy that I come from, and that's the legacy that I want us to stand in, which is demilitarization. It's standing with our friends in the Congo, free the Congo. It's standing with our friends in the Sudan, free the Sudan. It's standing with our friends in Palestine, free Palestine. It's standing with our friends right here in Detroit, free Detroit.
All right. All right, Sister Piper Carter. And I want to find out, is Wardell Montgomery here, the poet? Has he arrived yet? Okay, we'll bring him up later when he gets here. What about DJ Righteous? All right.
Peace. Can y'all hear me? All right, give it up for Piper Carter one more time, please. I'm just gonna go into it. Piper covered so much. She took care of anything I was gonna say before that. So let me get started. I come to you as a visionary who finds it necessary to be the voice of the people, for the people, by the people, because I am of the people. I want you to close your eyes and listen. Listen to the voices echoing in the wind. Listen to the voices screaming from deep within. Can't you hear the cries of our ancestors captured and placed in the bows of ships? Can't you see them being beaten and whipped on their backs like shaklack, clack? If that's too far for you to reach back, imagine being shot in your back 5 times like Walter Scott for a broken brake light at a traffic stop. Imagine you're home alone like 92-year-old Katherine Johnston when suddenly your privacy is invaded. Home raided by crooked narcotic officers using a no-knock search warrant as permission to knock your door down. Terrified, you fire one shot from a rusty 38 and miss, and they reply with a 39-shot volley of bullets that hit you, handcuff you, watch you bleed to death, place weed in your basement, concoct a fabricated fairy tale with an informant to say that he brought drugs from your house, file a fake incident report to support their lies while your death is ruled a tragic mistake. Imagine you're out at Club Kahlua celebrating your bachelor party like 23-year-old Sean Bell when undercover officers claim they see you arguing outside the club with the pimp. They assume you're about to do a drive-by, move in unannounced, pounce on your vehicle and attack. And for the next 30 seconds, this pack of rabid dogs unleash a 50-shot barrage on you and your unarmed friends. Tragically, you, the groom-to-be, fatally becomes a victim of unholy matrimony in an authorized marriage ceremony that happens too much in our community. So you part your fiance in death before she becomes your wife. And the happiest day of your life never comes into fruition. And by the power vested in them, I now pronounce you a victim of police terrorism. Your homicide rule justified in the eyes of their system. You may now kiss your life and your future wife goodbye. Now, I want you to open your eyes and realize that these are only a few of the real lives stolen and taken away at ground zero by these neo-COINTELPRO popos, always getting acquitted when they know they did it, and they need to quit it because the people will never forget the reality of police brutality in our communities, which is to serve us and protect themselves. We need to protect ourselves from these cops, these crooks out trolling streets who be rolling deep looking for people to beat like Floyd Dent, abusing their power, living in delusions of grandeur, trying to slander us with propaganda when we fuss, but what's good for the gander is good for the goose. And what would happen if these chickens came home to roost or these pigs flopped and slopped? Bad cop, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when them come for you? Bad cop, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when them come for you? What if there was a reality show called Cops Drop, when the community would put the block on lock, set up shop, and cop watch? And every time a cop rolled down the block, they would get stopped. The moment they opened their mouth, they would get socked, told to get out of the car with their hands up so they can get locked with 3 hots in the cot. And if they tried to resist, they would get dropped. And if they continued to persist, they would get popped with the Glock, put in the pine box to rot with a flag on top to match those red, white, and blue lights on their squad cars. What if the drop squads were acquitted with justified justice? Would the cops sit back in silence, or would the cops resort to violence? These are just a few things to make you go, I want you to close your eyes and listen. Listen to the voices echoing in the wind. Listen to the voices saying, I can't breathe. Listen to Eric Garner, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Sandra Bland, Tamir Rice, Ayanna Jones, Oscar Grant, Amadou Diallo, Corinne Gaines, Kendra James, and the thousands of other names that we'll never hear screaming. Bad cops. Bad cop, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when them come for you? Bad cop, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when them come for you? Bad cop, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when them come for you? Bad cop, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when them come for you? Peace.
DJ Righteous. Yeah. All right. And our next speaker will be from the Detroiters for Tax Justice. Russ Ballant is here to represent them. Russ, want to come up?
Okay, thank you for the guidance. Detroiters for Tax Justice was formed in April to begin the fight and accelerate the fight to stop the massive looting of our schools, our libraries. It was formed to stop the transfer of wealth from the working class to the billionaire class. When the city council finally approved giving $800 million of taxpayer money to two men worth $20 billion, we said they keep ruling us and overruling us, and we're organizing to fight back and build something that will prevail. This statement was composed by DFT co-coordinator Theo Pride and myself. Theo was going to speak today, but is now practicing COVID quarantine with his family. We wish them a quick and full recovery. This day commemorates one of the greatest philosophers, organizers, and orators in American history. Dr. King did not work on issues in silos, ignoring other justice issues. As he led a civil rights movement, he also opposed a massive killing of Vietnamese by the same president that he needed for civil rights laws. He did not trade one for the other, but expanded his vision of justice and action that embraced striking workers in Memphis. The power of his vision was breaking the silos of single-purpose intent. We need that movement-building outlook today, the one that Dr. King was creating before his murder. Too many today are working in silos and not connecting where common purpose exists. We need more unity today when we see an influential president candidate promising a one-day dictatorship when he begins his project of exterminating vermin. A man whose once favorite bedtime was reading Hitler's collected speeches, and that came from his former wife. A man who will purge upper levels of government at any and all non-supporters in day one. This proto-fascist phenomenon is emerging also on the world stage, where a neo-Nazi AfD in Germany is polling 23% support. Marine Le Pen in France is polling higher than Macron to become the leader of France. She is supporting Israel's war on Palestinians as she and the neo-Nazi AfD seek the mass expulsion of millions of Middle East peoples from their countries, even if they are citizens. And we see our own government supporting extreme rightist Netanyahu regime that has killed Palestinians 20 times the number killed by the Hamas attack. The Netanyahu cabinet routinely uses dehumanizing terms toward all Palestinians. Is there anyone who believes Dr. King would have respected U.S. support for this? Not a chance. Nationally and locally, we are also faced with a billionaire class that seeks to rule politics and economic exploitation. Yet we continue to remain working in silos. Locally, we have billionaires that have demanded and received billions of tax dollars, our tax dollars, with no public record of where that money, wealth transfer from working class Detroit taxpayers, we don't know where it went. They refuse to tell us. They are massively looting our schools, our libraries, our special needs children, funds that pay city debt, parks, and other education funds. This is undermining neighborhood services to feed projects preferred by the mayor and too many on our city council. Many citizens have testified to stop this corrupt behavior, but the billionaires overrule us and walk away with our tax money intended for public works and public needs. We have city agencies quietly filing court actions to seize homes and businesses on the weakest of claims. In fact, the claims are practically non-existent, often without prior notice to the owner. We have before us now a proposal to give, not loan, give $250 million to the owner of the Detroit Pistons, whose personal wealth is over $8 billion, and his business wealth has $47 billion in assets, all to build luxury condos. And we have a mayor determined to get a law passed that would give him the power to hyper-tax properties to drive owners, quote, to the suburbs, unquote, so the mayor could possibly take their land for the benefit of others. DFCJ has worked tirelessly in Lansing to stall this bill, but it needs to be brought to an end. In a city where we struggle around literacy for children, homes for the neediest, services in our neighborhoods, we need a higher and broader standard of justice and unity to reverse this corruption and exploitation. If Martin Luther King saw these realities, what would he say? If he said, shame, thank you, sister. If he said organize and fight, who would say no? Let us end working in silos and build a unity of community, labor, and clergy, and elevate our struggles. Thank you.
Thank you, Russ Ballant, Theo Pride, and Detroiters for Tax Justice. This is just a check-in. Is Shoshana Shakura here or Wardell? Okay. Miriam Lowen is on the list, and she cannot be here, but she asked me to read one of her poems. This poem was written, who? Okay, if come forward, Wardell, if you're here, come forward. Shoshana, if you're here, come forward. So you can be seated here. Thank you. This poem by Miriam was written in Detroit in 1970, 54 years ago. It's called To the Zionists. Thoughts I had while preparing to meet Palestinians in refugee camps in Lebanon and Jordan as guest of GUPS, the General Union of Palestinian Students. You call me masochist, misguided, self-hating. When I look at my sister Elaine from Syria and see myself meeting by chance on Belle Isle. When my brother from Lebanon speaks to me and his salam alaikum is familiar. As a child, I learned that the people's storyteller in the shtetl, born the same name, Sholem Aleichem, the universal greeting of Semitic peoples. You call me foolish for loving my people while you blighted by Europe and talk of master race, continue the Nazi plague, to sit in a cafe and smell no smoke but your own cigarette. If you have heard this poem before, perhaps it is because you wrote it. This is not a poem, but the heart of the people beating in everyone, even in you. Miriam revised this poem January 14th for MLK Detroit and starting the 4th month of the genocide against the Gazan people. Give it up for Miriam's poem. And now I'm going to switch hats. I'm Aurora Harris, and I am with the lecturer employee organizations. We call ourselves the LEOs. We're with AFT Local 6244. Good morning and peace, everyone. Thank you for coming. I'm at the University of Michigan Dearborn campus. I've been at the campus for 12 years, and I teach over 8 different courses. The lecturers at our campuses want you to know that at Dearborn, Ann Arbor, and the Flint, we are now bargaining for a new contract. Some of the wins in the last 2 contracts, we have been able to secure some meaningful wins. Big increases in the salary from 2017 and parity in the minimum salaries. Another gain was professional development for inclusive teaching. I serve on a committee as a member that reviews the applications for the grants to the lecturers. However, U of M is unable to retain talented lecturers and hire in new lecturers because of the current salaries and U of M's inability to keep up with their peer institutions. This hurts U of M students. Lecturer increases have not kept up with hyperinflation of recent years. Even when the large raises that we received in our last contracts, it hasn't kept up with the increasing costs of food and gas and other day-to-day expenses. Lecturers are seeking a substantial raise to be able to stabilize their lives and focus on their teaching rather than pursuing second jobs. With U of M being rated the best public university in the country and the third wealthiest, there should be no reason to pay faculty members with masters and PhDs starting salaries of only $51,000 a year when everyone else is paying more. Every colleague I know at Dearborn, Ann Arbor, and Flint are highly qualified, specialized, and dedicated to their students. Lecturers contribute significantly to the university and deserve their fair share of wages and respect. Lecturers aren't looking to get rich. We're just looking for a fair share. U of M has hired more administrators with average salaries that are double of the lecturers. Management made countless decisions that have negatively impacted our enrollment and our budget. Administrators are often justifying their jobs that cost at the university. They're justifying their jobs and they cost the university countless of dollars. But still, U of M prioritizes these hires and these salaries. This is about priorities and choices and not a lack of funds. It's time to prioritize those in the classroom. It's time for our fair share. So what do we hope to achieve at this next contract campaign? In Dearborn, a major concern is the conversion of many courses from 3 to 4 credits, which means it's more work. We need one clearly written policy that all departments, programs, and colleges can follow regarding the 3 to 4 credit hour conversions, instead of the rubric's cube of decision-making and approval, which can cause a loss in salary, increases in benefits, costs, or result in limiting the types of courses a lecturer can teach. We need more reasonable and transparent workloads overall. Our student population, we need and want more lecturers of diversity. Our student population, particularly on the Dearborn campus, is very diverse. It's important to have a faculty that mirrors this. A big part of this comes from increasing the wages that we are offered. And we also deserve child care to help combat the huge burden of child care costs at the university that claims to be family friendly. We're expected to engage in professional development, but when we are offered those opportunities outside of the university, some of us are denied and the ability to get substitutes for the courses that we were offered. We need some change now. Lecturers shouldn't need to pay substantial amounts out of their pockets to participate in professional development that benefits the university. While we gained pay parity and minimum salaries, we must continue to maintain that parity. Additionally, we need to address those longer serving lecturers to make sure that they receive the increases they deserve on all 3 campuses, as well as their pension benefits and other benefits that are supposed to come to them. And finally, we deserve a fair share and salary increases for all faculty. We can only get there through coming together and organizing, and we would all like to thank every union organizer that came out to help us during the first round of bargaining last fall, and will continue and support us as we go forward. We are organized to demand more with the help of our allies, and again, we thank you all. Lecturers just want to share in the successes of the university. We just want a fair share, and we are organized to demand more with the help of our friends, families, and again, our allies. U of M can afford to do better by its students, faculty, and staff. It's up to all of us to push them to give us a fair share. Thank you. And now I'd like to announce our next poet, Wardell Montgomery.
Good afternoon. It's a real pleasure to be a part of this wonderful humanitarian program. And I feel really inspired by this and just happy to be a part of this over the years. The poem I'm going to do is called Record of War. I'm going to have some accompanied by Bill Meyer. Record of War. The preachers prayed for peace. World leaders gave us war. The voters voted for peace. World leaders gave us war. The beggars begged for peace. World leaders gave us war. Poets penned poems promoting peace. World leaders gave us war. Singers sung songs about peace. World leaders gave us war. Students had to read a thick book, War and Peace. World leaders gave us war. Some parents lived an example of peace. World leaders gave us war. For thousands of years, activists worked for peace. World leaders gave us war. History tells us that rare is peace. World leaders gave us war. Starving people are hungry for peace. World leaders gave us war. Sick people pray for a healing of peace. World leaders gave us war. Kind, rich people donated millions for peace. World leaders gave us war. Educated people wrote a treaty for peace. World leaders gave us war. A few legislators wrote a policy of peace. World leaders gave us war. Merciful little dying children cried out for peace. World leaders gave us war. Senile seniors who forgot everything but wanted peace. World leaders gave us war. Birds, animals, plants, even the rocks cried out for peace. World leaders gave us war. I go to sleep dreaming of a world festival of peace. World leaders gave us war. If this sounds like a broken record, I pray this record would be broken. Thank you.
All right, Wardell Montgomery. One of our outstanding poets and songwriters here in Detroit. Our next guest speaker really needs no introduction. He, along with tens of thousands of other workers, have put the working class back on the map here, not only in the state of Michigan, but throughout the United States. And of course, the stand-up strike was a technique that many of us were not familiar with. However, it was quite successful in winning major gains for the UAW, but not only for the UAW, but for other working class organizations. Brothers and sisters, let's have a warm welcome for President Shawn Fain of the UAW International.
All right, good afternoon, Detroit family. You know, I'm honored to be here today and proud to be here. I'm joined by some of our leadership with the International Executive Board, Secretary Treasurer Margaret Mock, Vice President Mike Booth, Region 1 Director LaShawn English, and Region 1D Director Laura Dickerson. And there are also many of our international staff and many of our members in the room today. I'm also honored to stand here with all of you community leaders that are the true organizers of change for humanity. Yeah, please give it up. I'm absolutely honored to join you today on a day of commemoration, celebration, and dedication to the cause of one of the greatest Americans to ever live, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I join you as president of the United Auto Workers, a union that was born and grew up alongside Dr. King. Both the UAW and Dr. King came up during the years of the Great Depression. And while our union was founded here in Detroit, just 6 years after Dr. King's birth, many of you may not know, our first sit-down strike, it wasn't in Flint, but a month prior to the Flint strike, it was at a Fisher Body plant near Atlanta, Georgia, the home of Dr. King. When I look at these things, I can't help but see the parallels between the story of Dr. King and the story of the United Auto Workers. Throughout my walk as a union rep, I've always found a lot of inspiration from Dr. King, his teachings and his words. You know, the fact is, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is one of the greatest labor leaders in our country's history. He wasn't president of any union, and they don't call him a labor leader in history books. But the struggle for economic and social justice on and off the job was a core part of the story of them and the vision of Dr. King. As a labor leader myself, I see King as a direct inspiration and a guiding light of the 21st century union movement. As we gather today to commemorate Dr. King's life and mission and legacy, I'm always struck by how intertwined the civil rights movement and the labor movement remain decades later. I see the echoes of Dr. King everywhere I go. Not just in our union's home, the Solidarity House, where the Reverend wrote an early draft of his I Have a Dream speech, but across the country, especially in the South, where Dr. King's voice and legacy looms large. My mind's in the South these days a lot. There are thousands of non-union auto workers concentrated in states like South Carolina, Alabama, Tennessee, and Kentucky. And thousands of these workers have launched their own movement for economic justice. In some ways, it's like nothing we've ever seen before. Tens of thousands of workers are taking action, signing union cards, launching public campaigns to win the economic justice we've just seen auto workers win at the Big Three here in Detroit and beyond. In other ways, I'd like to think Dr. King would find this movement deeply familiar. The South was Dr. King's home, and the home of both the American dreams and the American nightmares that Dr. King and many in the civil rights movement knew all too well. And our movement is now again walking down the path that Dr. King forged. Dr. King was no stranger to the fight for workers' rights. It was King who said, "All labor has dignity." Dr. King was no stranger to the strike. In fact, Dr. King's final campaign was exactly that, the Memphis sanitation workers' strike. It was King who said during that campaign, I quote this, "We've got to give ourselves to this struggle until the end. Nothing would be more tragic than to stop at this point. We've got to see it through. You may not be on the strike, but either we go up together or we go down together." Dr. King was no stranger to the UAW. At the 25th anniversary of our union's founding, Dr. King addressed nearly 6,000 UAW members at our convention at Cobo Hall here in Detroit. There he recalled to the assembled auto workers, in the birth of your organization, as you confronted recalcitrant antagonists, you forged new weapons appropriate to your fight. Thus, in the 30s, when industrial unionism sought recognition as a form of industrial democracy, there were powerful forces which said to you the same words we as African Americans hear now. Never. You are not ready. You are really seeking to change our form of society. You are Reds. You are troublemakers. You are stirring up discontent and discord where none exist. You are interfering with our property rights. You are captives of sinister elements who would exploit you. Both of us have heard these reckless charges. Both of us know that what we have sought were simple, basic needs without which no man is a whole person. In your pursuit of these goals during the middle 30s, in part of your industry, you creatively stood up for your rights by sitting down at your machines, just as our courageous students are sitting down at lunch counters across the South. And we are proudly borrowing your techniques. End of quote. The sit-down strikes that built the UAW and the sit-ins that built the civil rights movement were not just similar in their tactics. They also shared a common principle. The fight for justice knows no limits. Economic justice cannot end at the doors of a factory or work site. Social justice cannot end at the border of our country. One year to the day before Dr. King was assassinated, he gave his famous speech on the Vietnam War, where he said again, and I quote, "It should be incandescently clear that no one who has any concern for the integrity of life of America today can ignore the present war." He spoke to the poisoning effect war has, not just on its victims, but on its perpetrators. And as with so many writings and sayings of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, his words again echo today as if he's here in this room with us right now. Today, we find our government backing destruction of lives and villages, not in Vietnam, but in Gaza. And we hear the boosters of war claiming that real patriots support the bombing. But we know in this room that there is nothing more patriotic than the pursuit of justice, no matter where that takes us. That is why the UAW was proud to call for a ceasefire in Gaza and Israel. We must not be silent when it comes to the pursuit of peace and justice for working class people, the poor, and for all of humanity. That's a lesson we learned and continue to learn from Dr. King. It's that process of learning from one another, not following, not leading, but marching side by side, that marks the meaning of Martin Luther King Jr. Day for our union and for our movement. So I don't think it's a coincidence that our 21st century movement for Southern workers' rights has found its first home in the same state where Dr. King's fight left off, in Tennessee, where right now in Chattanooga, thousands of workers at Volkswagen have chosen to stand up to win their union, to change their lives and to change the future of auto workers in America. And I don't think it's a coincidence that our new auto industry has migrated to Alabama, where thousands of workers are choosing to stand up at Mercedes, Hyundai, Toyota, Honda, and Mazda. That state was in many ways King's most iconic battlefield, from the Montgomery bus boycott to Selma's Bloody Sunday. It's the same domain of anti-worker politicians and those who would stoke racial division that America's 21st century auto worker must struggle on to achieve their fair share of economic and social justice. And I don't think it's a coincidence that nearly a century after Dr. King's birth and 90 years since the UAW's birth, we find that our struggles remain intertwined. As one movement goes, so goes the other. Finally, I must recognize Reverend King's historic role as a faith leader. Today in this house of worship, I feel the connection between King's faith and my own. Just as it was foundational in the civil rights movement, Scripture has guided our new labor movement. When I think of the labor movement and the civil rights movement, my favorite scripture always comes to mind, and that's Ecclesiastes 4:9 through 12, where it states, "Two are better than one, for they have a greater return for their labor. If one of them falls down, the other can help them up. But pity the person who falls and has no one there to help them up. Also, if two lie down together, they can keep warm. But how does one keep warm alone? Though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves. A cord of 3 strands is not easily broken." This scripture lays out the pathway to drive out and defeat the enemy of humanity, our oppressor, which is hate and greed. You know, there's a saying, whenever something good happens, something bad is trying to stop it. Hate and greed know no bounds. The fight against hate and greed is never ending. Better yet, the fight for economic and social justice, the fight for humanity, is eternal. And there is no more of a just cause in all of the world. Ecclesiastes 4:9 through 12 to me is what solidarity means. It's what Dr. King was speaking of when he said, either we go up together or we go down together. Only when we stand up together will we rise up and realize the dream of Dr. King, not just for ourselves, but for all of humanity. This is our generation's defining moment. So let's honor the legacy of Dr. King, and let's stand up and let's get to it. Thank you.
Before Brother Sean Fain takes his seat again, we have 2 awards to present to the UAW. This is from the Detroit Martin Luther King Committee. It's the People's Spirit of Detroit Award, and it reads, "Presented to the United Auto Workers by the Detroit MLK Committee on this day, January 15th of 2024. It says, "We honor the United Auto Workers for their defense of the working class during the strike in fall of 2023 against the Big Three. The UAW victory in this historic contract has inspired all poor and working people, both organized and unorganized, to collectively fight for just living wages and benefits. We especially applaud the humanitarian stance the UAW and other unions have taken, demanding an immediate ceasefire and lasting ceasefire in the genocidal war against the Palestinian people by Israel using U.S. weapons. This goes to the President of the UAW.
I just want to say one thing real quick. This is due to the work of thousands of our members standing up for social justice and economic change. This belongs to the membership of the UAW and all those who supported us in that fight. Thank you.
We have one more award from retired UAW local president Frank Hammer. Go ahead.
I'll tell you what it is. Greetings to you all, fellow Detroit progressives and UAW fighters. 20 years ago, I acquired this photo collage honoring the brave UAW men and women who were part of the 1937 sit-down strike in Flint. It was created by a member of Flint UAW Local 599 for the opening of the Sit-Downers Memorial Park. I can't think of a more fitting union brother to receive this artwork than Shawn Fain, in honor of his leadership in the short 10 months since he was elected president by the UAW membership. If you agree, make some noise. President Fain described last fall's 40-day stand-up strike against the Big Three as a sequel to the sit-downs, which forced GM to recognize and bargain with the UAW. In so doing, he tapped into the fighting spirit of today's UAW members, many of whom are with us here. Will you please raise your hands? UAW. Woo! Taking a page from Flint, Brother Fain urged the strikers and the entire UAW auto workforce to view our fight as part of a broader movement against the greed of the billionaire class. He called for bringing down the billionaire's economy and replacing it with an economy that works for the working class, not just for U.S. workers, but globally. He showed his intent by ending the auto contracts on May Day in 2028 and has invited all unions to do the same in time for a mass mobilization and a general strike. Brother Fain affirmed the threat of global warming and demanded for auto workers a just transition to EVs. His presence here today demonstrates his belief that the working class struggle and Black freedom struggle are inseparable. Lastly, he recently showed his internationalism by standing together in Washington, D.C. with our next speaker, Sister Rashida, to demand an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. President Fain, it's an honor to present you with the Spirit of Flint Award. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Before we bring up Sister Rashida, I'd like to recognize that everyone in here is in a historical place with historical people. And this is a message to some of my students who came all the way out to attend this event. I was teaching a Detroit history and culture class, and I just covered some of the auto worker and revolutionary activism by people in Detroit. So to just draw a timeline. I was teaching about the Wildcat strikes that happened in 1968. So I'd like to recognize Marion Kramer and Carolyn Baker, who are the families of General Baker, who led the 1968 Wildcat strikes. And they were kind enough to come to my class and talk about the efforts and the struggles that they had, which gave my students a chance to meet people who are from past history, but to let them know that they're still here fighting for the rights of people. And then while I was teaching, Sean Fain's strike started. So we were able to tie those two lessons on struggles for people, for the rights of people together from past to present. So thank you again, Sean Fain. Thank you, students who came. Thank you, the Baker family that came. At this time, we're gonna have our offering. Bill Meyer's gonna play some music and we'll take up our offering. And then after that, we're gonna have Shoshana Shakur, a fellow educator, and then we'll have Sister Rashida Tlaib come up. Thank you. Okay, and Augustus Williamson is going to sing. Thank you.
Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, let me stand. I am weak. Lord, I want through the storm, and I lead me on to the light. Take my hand, precious Lord, and lead me on home. When my way grows weary, precious Lord, linger here when my life is oh, oh, hear my cry, steps, Lord Jesus, lest I fall. Take my hand, precious Lord, and no sweet child on The darkness of peace and the night draws near, and the day is past and gone. At the river, my steps, hold my hand. Take my hand. And say, Lord, and lead this child home.
Thank you, Bill, Augustus, and Alan. That was Dr. Martin Luther King's favorite hymn. Give it up one more time for them. And our next poet is Shoshana Shakur.
Hello.
Come. Go to that.
Okay. Happy Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day. I bring revolutionary greetings on behalf of my organization, Malcolm X Grassroots Movement, and also on behalf of my revolutionary brother, Chokwe Lumumba, and our family. And, you know, if Chokwe was here, a strong revolutionary brother who was a humanitarian, if Dr. King was here, a strong revolutionary humanitarian, they both would say, I stand with Palestine. And I know the next honorable guest that is coming up here to speak. I won't be able to speak to her after. I know she's got a lot to do, but this is a strong revolutionary sister, our honorable Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib. And I want to say from our organization, Dr. Mutulu Shukua, who spent 37 years in prison unjustly. Rashida was one of the people who helped us get our brother out so he could come home for 6 months and then transition. Thank you, Rashida, from my heart. And I didn't bring one of my pieces, but I wanted to honor a sister who is also a strong revolutionary freedom fighter, poet. She's local, she's ours, we treasure her, and a lot of you know her as Dr. Aneb Gloria House. They call our names, so many. We hold their names in the lump of tears we carry in our throats and cannot swallow, but taste the salt, falling asleep and waking, weeping and mourning. African bodies, ashes on a 4 centuries old pyra of U.S. repression and state-sponsored violence. Our young sons and daughters preferred kindling, thrown on every day, keep the fire ablaze, exploding with terror, Call the names of these sacrifices: Michael Brown, Philando Castile, Stephon Clark, George Floyd, Eric Gardner, Freddie Gray, Botham Jean, Atiana Jefferson, Ayanna Jones, Tamir Rice, Breonna Taylor, Deontay Wright, and they go on and on and on. Those sacrifices, those names of our loved ones who were murdered by the police. Where were they headed that day? To see Auntie? To buy diapers for the baby? To take dinner to Grandpa Charles? Or just hurry home from work? Just stroll down to the corner store? What were they longing for in life? What were they just about to do or just about to say? What future were they dreaming? Alive on the other side, where everything swells with love, they call our name. They urge us on, and they tell us to believe in the inevitable unfolding of a new world. They tell us to keep demanding justice. Stand with Palestine.
Thank you, Shoshana. Abiomi.
All right, up next is another speaker who really needs no introduction. She is the Congresswoman from the state of Michigan, who has, from the city of Detroit, definitely. So we just wanted to acknowledge and bring up our Congresswoman. She's the only Palestinian American in the United States Congress, and for that reason, she should be protected. She has also spoken out very forcefully on behalf of the people of the city of Detroit and the state of Michigan. And in that case, we should also support her. Let's have a warm welcome for Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib.
Thank you so much, family. I need to always come home, and I get so emotional to be in a room with all of you. That basically really refuels my soul. Thank you. I can tell you, when I got censured, and it took 22 Democrats to do it with them, because it wouldn't have passed without them. But I'll tell you, I stood there, and it was hard. I know it was hard for many of my colleagues. But as I stood there in the well, and there was only a handful of folks that stood next to me, from Congresswoman Maxine Waters, who will always be my forever chairwoman, who said, keep your head up. Barbara Lee was like, don't you dare give them your tears. To so many others. The littlest of all of them was Debbie Dingell. And I'll tell you, you go and look at who spoke out against it on the floor. A lot of them were my beautiful, beautiful sisters in service. You know who they are. From Corey to Lahan, to Ayana, to Delia, and my brother Jambal, Andre. And then amongst all of them was Debbie Dingell. And so I just want to thank her, one, for coming out for a ceasefire, sis, and for standing with me during the ceasefire, during the censure. Thank you so much. You know, I always remind my colleagues in Washington, D.C., Dr. Martin Luther King Day is every single day in Detroit. We don't wait for a day to celebrate his movement. We show through action every single day, every single corner, every single movement This day holds significance for our community as a profound reminder of the enduring legacy of a man who dedicated his last breath to the pursuit of justice, equality, and human dignity. You know, I remind my colleagues also, because they keep forgetting, that I grew up in the most beautiful, blackest city in the country. And we birth movements. We don't wait for you all in Congress to tell us how we feel and what to do. We already know what to do. And the other really important thing, you know, every corner, and when I was growing up, from the murals to the Black mothers up and down the street that continued to tell my mother, even with her heavy accent, Fatima, raise your voice, we can't hear you. Remember, this girl, like, I'm Palestinian, I'm Muslim, and I'm watching these mothers tell my mother, we want to see you, we want to hear you. That's what's been instilled in me, to always speak up for all of you. And you know, we birthed a movement that folks don't realize we did. I don't care cutting off water in Detroit or cutting off water in Gaza. It is violence, and we won't allow it to happen. So we are fighting in Detroit, where we birthed the movement that water is a human right. As we all continue to fight for justice, never forget transformative change. And this is something Grace Lee Boggs taught me. It's in the audience. I used to be one of y'all just sitting in the audience, listening to these incredible speakers like President Fain and so many. Transformative change doesn't happen with who's in the White House or who's in Congress. I got to remind you all that you think somebody woke up, the President of the United States woke up and said, man, I should sign a Civil Rights Act bill. You think, no, really, do you think that happened? No. People marched, they boycotted, they put their lives on the line. You see what Dr. King had to do. Got arrested 20 times. You think that all of a sudden the Congress thought, man, organizing unions should be a right. It should be something that's precious. Do you think Congress thought that was a great idea? No, y'all made them. Y'all made them do it. So the work that you do in organizing in the streets, not only through the labor movement, the civil rights movement, to the anti-hate movement, anti-poverty movement that we all are part of in this room, that's what's going to make our country move towards transformative change. And I believe in us. I believe in us because we're always coming from a place of love. During the civil rights movement, when our Black neighbors experienced dehumanizing racism and segregation, we protested, we marched. I just came from another event where they reminded us of Mammy Teal literally having to open the casket of her child to show everyone what status quo was doing, the violence. And some of them had to do it for years and years. And in the labor movement, when workers were fed up with exploitation and corporate greed and decided to form unions to fight back, we organized, we went on strike. And again, my father with fourth grade education, accent, Muslim, Palestinian, could never have felt human dignity in the workplace other than the fact that he was part of a union and he was equal to everyone else in the assembly line. Our government, and Dr. King knew this, has always been an institution that responds to external pressure. Never underestimate the power of collective action and solidarity. President Fain reminded us today that Dr. King understood the connection between racial justice and economic justice. And I still remember sitting at Liberty Temple Baptist Church in my district. And you know, I always stick out at a Baptist church, y'all. So I stood there, and Pastor Bland Jr. is doing this amazing job. And as all of a sudden, I swear, Debbie, he just like looked right at me. And I was like, ooh, he's going to say something to me. And he goes, our country is not divided. We're just disconnected. And I was like, what? Because I'll tell you this is so important. Because they don't want us all in the room together. They don't. They don't want us working on anti-poverty or ending homelessness or immigrant rights or women's rights or any of that in the room with the unions. They don't want us in the room with the other folks. When people come knocking on the door of my colleagues in the Rayburn building, I watch. They ain't Palestinian or Muslim asking for a ceasefire. It's the same person that comes there and asks them for housing issues. It's the same person that asks them about water issues, environmental justice issues. They don't know what to do. They can't believe the majority of Americans of all different likes understand the connectivity of supporting war and what that means to our movement here at home. It is what they're afraid of. It's where Dr. King knew he had to help those sanitation workers. He couldn't stand idly by. He knew the connection. And lately I've been thinking about Dr. King's words. There comes a time when silence is a betrayal. For far too long, y'all, too many of our elected officials have decided to remain silent about things that really matter to us most because it's convenient, because they don't want to be targeted. They're scared. God, are they scared? Because they've decided it's better to say nothing at all. And it is painful. And many of them are human beings alike. But they need to know the courage they can fuel themselves with is out here in their districts, in their communities that are going to have their backs every single time they say no more. And I'll tell you, silence has always emboldened in our history. Look at it. Emboldened, it literally fueled racism, inequality, injustice in our country and around the world. Today, we honor Dr. King's legacy. May we also remember Dr. King as a leader of the anti-war movement, speaking out against militarism, as well as calling for a ceasefire in Vietnam when it was unpopular to you all. Look it up. Dr. King said a nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death. That's something came out of Dr. King's. I watch how year after year my colleagues in Washington tell us that there's no money for life-saving programs to address hunger or poverty, only to turn around and pass another record-breaking military budget, giving $886 billion of our tax dollars to fund bombs, weapons, war crimes, no questions asked. And let me tell you, and Congresswoman Dingell and I are always talking about the VA and Dingell VA. We're always talking about don't think this budget has anything to do with our veterans not having housing. They don't have housing. Look how much money you think that's in that budget. No, we still have huge homelessness among our veterans. The fact that some of them are still suffering from a mental health crisis among our veterans. 2/3 of our neighbors in Metro Detroit say they support a permanent ceasefire in Gaza, including 80% Democrats. Our government must stop funding endless wars. We must. When I talk to my folks coming in from Afghanistan, from Iraq, they have tears in my eyes because they said they had to dehumanize themselves to dehumanize a whole people. And they're still suffering. There's a toll to pay every time we send folks to war. And I know my residents send me to Congress to invest in life, not death. So I cannot remain silent, just like many of you cannot. Many of you honestly give me so much strength. Every time I look up, you are standing up and demanding peaceful coexistence. You are, I feel it every single time, demanding a lasting ceasefire to save as many lives as possible, no matter faith, no matter ethnicity. Our elected leaders and the president must listen to our voices. In the face of adversity, y'all, Dr. King was never silent. He showed up unwavering courage, boldly challenging the status quo through his commitment to nonviolence resistance. As we strive today and every single day in our district and our communities of Dr. King's dreams and the reality, may we always remember his tenacity and commitment to human dignity and justice for all. And again, I want to thank you all. I know it hasn't been easy and it can be incredibly frustrating, but look at so many movements before us, the anti-movement before we all were there. The movement to literally work on making sure folks have human dignity in the workplace, to folks that continue every single day to fight poverty and so much more. It came because all of you demanded your government to do it. And so again, thank you so much for inspiring me every single day and for continuing the legacy of Dr. King.
Honorable Rashida Tlaib. Will. At this time, I'd like to ask our next poet, Ben Will, to come on up to the mic. He is one of the Motown Mike spoken word competition poets.
Thank you so much. It is such an honor to be in this room, and even greater of an honor to be asked to do a poem on the program. It is a big deal to be in this space where healing is happening, where the work is happening, where the fight is happening. And I'm a little different. That's why I'm like, why am I here? Because I like to consider myself a luminary of joy and humor. And sometimes in this day of service, we forget that it's also a day of celebration. And I'm here to remind us all to take time, intentional time, to rest and to celebrate as we do the work, and that the rest and the celebration is also the work. The graduation poem, or the interconnectedness of Black folk when told not to do something that we gon' do anyway, or they told us to hold our applause until the end of the ceremony at an HBCU, or I wish somebody would, a poem by Ben Will. I dare somebody tell me to be quiet. I dare somebody tell me to shut my mouth, criticize my kingship, reprimand my majesty. I dare somebody. 2 by 2, we march through security knowing that we have nothing to hide. You can look as closely as you care to today, officer. All I brought was joy, and I assure you there is plenty to share. Do you need some? Just lead me to my seat so I can set this magic somewhere it needs to prime with the others, because it's celebration time. And I dare someone try to tame me on the day. I dare someone challenge me to hold in my holler, caution my cackle, qualm my conscience, silence my soul. No, because there's something about brown, beige, and black skin marching in regalia, airbrush caps and bedazzled gowns that make you kind of excited, remind you that we were royalty, edit, that we are royalty. And I guess this is somewhat of a coronation, the descendants of kings and queens being lauded at the apex of academia. Tell me we ain't great, and I wish somebody would tell me I can't make no noise. Roll their eyes in my rollicking roar, try to put a pause on my praise, set me off with a shh. Because are we not witnessing a miracle in the making? A restoration from centuries of oppression, a correction to the construct of inequality. Were these not the ones ancestors stuck on ships prayed forth? Should this moment not be revered? Is this not what they call a jubilee? Y'all got a whole horn section, cymbals, snares, and tom-toms, a walking wave of rhythm, and you had the nerve to teach them My Eyes Don't Cry by King Stevie? What you mean, hold my applause? I'm finna hustle like I lost my mind, jit like I ain't got no sense, make a new friend, joy voices, and cheer for each other's relatives. There is strength when our voices unite. And suddenly, I see why they separated us. Why adversaries built barriers within the brotherhood, told us that one nose was better than the other, said that one grade of hair meant that you meant more when we all came from the same place. I see why, as this hallowed hall fills itself to the breaking point with elders and youth and parents and all of your cousins and them. I see how they felt threatened by the revelatory recognition of us knowing who we are. I see what made them scared regarding the shattering of silos by the warmth of this wisdom. I see why they want us divided, because it's something mighty glorious about finding your people within your people. Yeah, I see why they would be threatened by that. But today is not about them. No, today is reserved to embolden this new generation of policymakers, researchers, entrepreneurs, artists, educators, engineers, and scientists. Today, we encourage the soon-to-be Nobel laureates, Grammy nominees, and MacArthur geniuses. Today was reserved for fathers affirming, son, you did it. For proud cousins to shoot off streamers, for aunties to FaceTime uncles to ensure that they strolled just right, for grandparents to verify that their sacrifices weren't for naught, for siblings to shout as if the achievement were their own, for the threefold cadence of Black mamas exclaiming, that's my baby, that's my baby, that's my baby. Today, I acknowledge that Black people are music, Black people are paint. Black people are math and logic and literature. Black people are theorems and theology. Black people are the cure of ailments and the solution to complex social challenges. Black people are culinary delicacies, athletic first and prolific debates. Black people are everything and worthy of every celebration. And today, Black people will not be silenced. Today was reserved to host this masterful orchestration, this conscious cacophony, this loud laugh of love and triumph and pride and struggle and tragedy and success and appreciation of being both gifted and Black. And I wish somebody would try to stop us. Thank you.
Very well. Non-gifted and Black.
All right, Ben Will. Our next speaker will be Nada from the Palestinian Youth Movement. Please, let's have a warm welcome for the Palestinian youth here in North America.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, salam and peace. That poem was absolutely beautiful, and I'm just absorbing it. It's truly an honor to be here today and to share a few words on this 21st annual MLK Day Rally in Detroit. My name is Nada, and I'm a member of the Palestinian Youth Movement Detroit chapter. The PYM is an international grassroots organization of Palestinian and Arab youth united for the full liberation of Palestine, the right for all refugees to return to their homelands, and for all political prisoners to be free from Zionist jails in Gaza, in the West Bank, and in all of Palestine. I stand before you as an American-born Palestinian and a daughter to a Nakba survivor. My roots and my ancestral struggle for survival and liberation shaped my experiences growing up in Michigan. As a young child, I quickly learned that my family's history wasn't taught in the school textbooks, that my heritage barely existed in the eyes of the West, and that I would struggle to be seen as a Palestinian. Over time, I developed some coping mechanisms, but what I learned is that Palestinians were not unique on this point, that the history and heritage of other oppressed people were also missing from our grade school textbooks, that the few excerpts on Indigenous people leading up to the first so-called Thanksgiving was not the full story, that the depiction of an isolated enslavement of Africans and oversimplification of the Emancipation Proclamation was not the full story either. This early indoctrination and fabrication of the truth carries on into our Western media outlets, and it plays a significant role in hindering our pursuit for liberation and justice of oppressed people from Detroit to Palestine. In honor of the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., we reflect on his vision for equality and his pursuit for justice and truth. Dr. King was unwavering in his stance against the U.S. war machine, as it was mentioned here a few times today. He stood for Black liberation just as much as he stood for justice and self-determination for the people of Vietnam and the indigenous people of Turtle Island. Dr. King understood the plight and poverty faced by marginalized communities in the U.S. was directly linked to the colonial conquest and exploitation of lands around the world. In his 1967 speech on Vietnam, he stated firmly, "Now it should be incandescently clear that no one who has any concern for the integrity and life of America today can ignore the present war. If America's soul becomes totally poisoned, part of that autopsy must read Vietnam. It is chilling how many different oppressed nations can be reflected by this quote. America's soul is poisoned, and its autopsy must read Vietnam, Chile, Korea, Iraq, Afghanistan, Yemen, Palestine, and many more. For over 100 days, all eyes have been on Gaza, and what we are witnessing is a genocide. In this time, the Zionist Israeli state has murdered over 23,900 Palestinians, about half of them children. Over 1,000 more children have been injured and subjected to amputations without anesthesia. Thousands of children have been orphaned, and thousands of children are facing starvation. Among the 1.1 million people in Gaza facing starvation collectively. The bombing, blockade, executions, and mass abductions are war crimes. And the murders of over 100 journalists in Gaza are war crimes and an effort to silence the truth. With all eyes on Gaza, we must recognize that the genocide we have been witnessing over the past 100 days is not an isolated crime against humanity. It is a continuation of over 100 years of settler colonial violence against Palestinians in their homeland, in Gaza, in the West Bank, and in all of Palestine. We must stand against this genocide, and we must stand against the funding of these atrocities by our government in the form of our tax dollars. In this moment of devastation, we practice hope, like the civil rights heroes and freedom fighters that came before our time. We find strength in the heroes of Gaza who refuse to give up. We find inspiration in the growing solidarity of the international community. We find courage in the resistance and people of Yemen, Lebanon, Iraq, and others, and we find honor in the brave people of South Africa. This moment holds pain, but also power. We must not lose sight of that in our pursuit of truth and justice. Let us reflect on the sacrifices and pain endured by our civil rights leaders and everyday people who fought alongside them for freedom and equality. We honor and uplift their full stories and not just the portions captured in our school textbooks and movies. Let us stand strong, unified in our demands today. Ceasefire in Gaza now, lift the siege on Gaza, end the occupation of Palestine, release all political prisoners, free them all, free, free Palestine. Thank you.
Free, free Palestine. Long live Palestine. Free, free Palestine. All right, all right. And one of the slogans that has come to the fore over the last several months is that we are all Palestinians. We have Yasmin, who is a poet, of course, come right on up. And we know that the Arab people, particularly the Palestinians, have a long, rich tradition of poetry and songwriting. Let's have a warm welcome for Yasmin.
Hi, everyone. I'm very honored to be here, and I'm also very nervous. My name is Yasmin. I am from Palestine. I'm actually supposed to be there right now, but on October 8th, my flight was canceled. So I am here right now sharing a poem that is actually not mine. It is a poem by the legendary revolutionary Palestinian poet and author Samih al-Qasim. And this poem was actually found in George Jackson's prison cell after his murder. This poem is called Enemy of the Sun. I may, if you wish, lose my livelihood. I may sell my shirt and bed. I may work as a stone cutter, a street sweeper, a porter. I may clean your stores or rummage your garbage for food. I may lie down hungry, O enemy of the sun, but I shall not compromise, and to the last pulse in my veins, I shall resist. You may take the last strip of my land, feed my youth to prison cells. You may plunder my heritage. You may burn my books, my poems, or feed my flesh to the dogs. You may spread a web of terror on the roots of my village, O enemy of the sun. But I shall not compromise, and to the last pulse of my veins, I shall resist. You may put out the light in my eyes. You may deprive me of my mother's kisses. Thank you. You may put out the light in my eyes. You may deprive me of my mother's kisses. You may curse my father, my people. You may distort my history. You may deprive my children of a smile and of life's necessities. You may fool my friends with a borrowed face. You may build walls of hatred around me. You may glue my eyes to humiliations, O enemy of the sun, but I shall not compromise. And to the last pulse in my veins, I shall resist. O enemy of the sun, the decorations are raised at the port. The exclamations fill the air, a glow in the hearts and in the horizon. A sail is seen challenging the wind and the depths. It is Ulysses, returning home from the sea of loss. It is the return of the son of my exiled ones. And for her sake and his, I swear, I shall not compromise. And to the last pulse in my veins, I shall resist, I shall resist, I shall resist. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Poet Nada and Yasmin. Thank you from the Palestinian Youth Movement. Our next speaker is Joshua Feinstein from the Jewish Voice for Peace. Let's welcome Joshua.
Thank you, and thank you very much to the Palestinian Youth Movement. And especially thank you to our representative in Congress, Rashida Tlaib. One day when they write the history of these times, Rashida's name will be writ large in those books. And as today is about great peoples in history, today is Martin Luther King Jr.'s 95th birthday. And as a Jewish American whose mother is a survivor of the Holocaust, I do understand when one race or one religion deems themselves superior and thusly attempts to exterminate or subjugate others from existence. So with that, I'd like to tell you a quick story. 12 days ago, I was in my in-laws' living room about a half a world away in Beirut, Lebanon, when the Israeli military fired a missile into a residential building down the block from our home. Our neighboring Israeli government felt it not necessary to heed international law and felt it their right to rain terror and fire from the sky. My immediate reaction was to swiftly check on my family and then ask my father-in-law, "Can you believe this?" And his response was, he was unfazed. People in that region of the world are so used to the Israelis attacking civilians, they've become used to it. It is like my dear neighbor Eric here in the United States, an African-American attorney and a well-respected member of our community. Eric is also very stoic in the face of danger. And Eric is also very used to the authorities violating his civil rights and impinging on his privacy. Well, this attack in Beirut, it was nothing compared to the hell that the Palestinian people in Gaza are experiencing right now. What the world is witnessing is a subjugation, an ethnic cleansing that is on par with the Holocaust, is on par with the South African apartheid, and is on par with 400 years of oppression right here in America. In the time that I finish talking with you, a Palestinian child will be slaughtered. A Palestinian child is killed by Israel every 10 minutes. So you may ask, what does something 6,000 miles away have to do with us? Well, I'll tell you. What the great Dr. King said was, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Whatever affects one directly affects us all indirectly. And for these attacks against the Palestinian civilians, we are directly paying the tab. $317 billion of money from our wallet is given to Israel. Yes, that is $317 billion with a B, no questions asked. Imagine what we could have done here at home with just a fraction of that money. For $6 billion, we could have eliminated all student debt. With $12 billion, we could have given health care to our entire citizenry, And for $20 billion, we could actually have eliminated homelessness here in America. While we struggle with no funding for health care, housing, clean water, or education, our money is busy being spent killing the children of Gaza. Children dying horrible deaths in every possible way. Signs of our starvation, and 24,000 souls murdered in cold blood by the Israeli government. So, we come back to you now at the turning of the tide to remind ourselves of our rich history of proud African Americans and proud Jewish Americans walking hand in hand as we marched on Washington and through the streets of Selma to Montgomery and recently to protest for George Floyd. And we, your Jewish brothers and sisters, here we stand before you. And we propose to further strengthen our alliance for justice and equality. So, just as Dr. King and his allies envisioned a Civil Rights Act, so can we envision an Equal Rights for Palestinians Act. And so, just as they envisioned a Fair Housing Act and a Voting Rights Act, so we envision a Ceasefire Act and an end to U.S. military funding for Israel. And just like Dr. King, we have a dream that one day all of Palestine will be free. And I firmly believe with all my existence that together we can make this dream a reality. God bless you all. God bless a free Palestine. And God bless freedom for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Joshua Feinstein. Jewish Voice for Peace.
Well, thank you so much for the Jewish Voice for Peace. They've been very active all over the country, occupying the U.S. Congress and doing a lot of other good work in defense of humanity. Our co-chair, Aurora Harris, has a poem she's going to read, and then after that, she will introduce our final speaker, who will be Attorney Nancy Parker from the Detroit Justice Center. Let's have another applause for Aurora Harris.
Thank you. I was going to read a poem that I had written about Palestine, but the youth and the poets did so well themselves, I'm going to read another poem that I wrote. It's called This Poem Has Checkpoints. Main entry, checkpoint, function, noun, a point at which an inspection or investigation is performed. This poem is my country. This poem is all citizens. This poem has checkpoints. This poem is equal power, economic resources, education, and ability to succeed. This poem is the depth of hate, racism, sexism, and greed in a room where humanity moves towards dialogue and freedom. The freedom to imprint each other's citizens' life on hearts and minds, where discrimination, occupation by force, stereotypes, and lies are exposed to find what's left of self-respect and respect of others, where the source of inhumanity in our souls is uncovered, defined, drawn from each distorted reality of why we dislike or hate each other. This poem has checkpoints. Whom does America belong to, really? What color of skin was your last humiliation, source of fear? What white privilege did you exercise today? How many times were you followed by police? Did you ask yourself, am I a racist? Did you ask yourself, how do I practice racism? Did you ask yourself, how homophobic am I? What shade of sexism is your favorite? What shade and body type of racism is your favorite? What box called home, office, school, or club do you collectively wear blinders in? Who do you tease or bully today? What level of emotional and physical torture turns you on? What have you been told about citizens from other cities, countries, religions, or towns? Who did you marginalize or redline today? What gender bias did you express today? Whose hand did you refuse to hold? Whose application did you deny? What body on streets and in war zones did you laugh at, look at, walk over? How many times a day, week, or month do you practice peace, nonviolence, conflict resolution, compassion? How do you express it? When was the last time you were offered a cup of coffee, tea, small talk, or recipe to an African American, a Native American, a Palestinian, Baptist, Muslim, Buddhist, Hindu, Catholic? Where's a safe place you can take them to dialogue about peace? What is an American? What is your responsibility to those that suffer? This poem is my country. Checkpoints are found in reflection in the mirror. Thank you. Thank you. And our next and final speaker for today is Nancy Parker, Executive Director of the Detroit Justice Center. Welcome, Nancy.
Good afternoon, good people. I'm not feeling it. Good afternoon. All right, there we go. There we go. I am beyond honored and blessed to be before you today. The line of speakers that you just witnessed should lit you with fire, to fuel you with that righteous indignation to tear this whole damn system down. All right, I'm excited. I am excited, and I want you to be the same. In the words of Dr. King, I would say that we've come a long, long way in our struggle to make justice a reality, but we have a long, long way to go before the problem is solved. As true as that statement was in 1966, I come to share that same reflection with you in 2024. Yes, we have made gains since Dr. King uttered those words, but we once again find ourselves in the season of repression. However, even with this reality, do not be dejected. Do not feel downtrodden, for this is precisely how we know that we're progressing towards freedom. This country operates via an old, recycled playbook. So when you know your history, you can understand where you are in it currently. After every shift of power and win for Black folks and other marginalized communities, our oppressors go on the attack, and they attempt to stifle our movement. But we always emerge fortified in the fire. Now, while 2020 was heavy with grief and loss, it was also very powerful as we saw this country have the largest social movement that's ever taken place. A movement that shook people from their slumber and caused them to see what others have known for a long time and what Dr. King so eloquently articulated, which is that America is the greatest purveyor of violence in the world. The Black Lives Matter movement opened the eyes of many to the violent police state that Black and brown people live in every day. And it brought folks together to demand justice and accountability. And in response, what did we see the government do? What did we see our so-called liberal friends do, who are moderate, right? We have our great Rashida Tlaib representing us strong, but she cannot do it alone. And instead, once we rose up, once we had our collective voice, we saw the government overturn affirmative action, gut the Voting Rights Act that people, our ancestors, literally bled and died for. They banned our books because, like I said at the top, when you know your history, you know your place in it, right? They lodged an attack on our queer community. They've stripped us of our reproductive rights, and they continue to commit state-sanctioned murder. But guess what, y'all? They're scared. They are scared, y'all. That lets us know that we are on the right path. They are scared of what will happen to them when we, the people, finally realize that our struggles are interconnected. That has been on display today. That is because our freedoms are interconnected. We must rise up together because they cannot defeat a united people. When we organize, we win. And I'm going to say that again because it bears repeating. When we organize, we win. There's a lot of organizing happening right now across the globe, across the country, and right here in Detroit. Recently, a research group just released the data showing that in this past year, in 2023, the police killed a record high number of people. And this was 30 more people than they killed the previous year in 2022. So even after the public lynching of George Floyd, the brutal murder of Breonna Taylor, and all the folks who were marching for those so-called criminal justice reforms. Folks have been advocating for, we need body cameras. We need to ban chokeholds. We need to ban this and that. These measures are not saving us. They continue to kill us. We are dying a slow death until and unless we rise up together. Because if this is a casualty of your system, if the death and the blood of brothers and sisters is the price we have to pay to live in your police state, I don't want it. And you shouldn't want it either. Do not wait until they have taken your brother, your sister, your mother. See that brotherhood and sisterhood in every single human being. That is what Dr. King was trying to preach to us. We are one people. I want to live. I don't want to police a system and tell them which ways that they can kill me. I want to live another day. I brought my 2 little girls here today because they mean the world to me. I do not have a choice but to be standing up here today. I have a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old who I look into their little black faces, and I have to account for what I did during this time. Whether I will see freedom in my time, their time, my grandkids' time, I do not know. That is not the question. The question is, what are you doing today? Because I know what my ancestor did before me. They laid the path so that I can be standing here today. And I encourage and employ everyone here to do the same things. Take up arms. We must tear down this entire carceral system. It is simply, very simply at its core, a death-making institution. We must build up life-affirming institutions. We must see each other and care for one another, centering the dignity, the humanity, and the compassion that we all deserve because we are human beings. In Detroit, like other majority Black and brown communities, we have an over-policing problem. The Detroit Police Department, the Michigan State Police, they proliferate our communities. Yet we are no safer because of it. We cannot continue to do this. We cannot continue to move this way when it does not further our interests. Stop voting for the oppressors that are killing us and only see us as checking a box when it comes time to vote, but do not actually care whether we live or not. DPD officers are known for violating people's rights, from protesters in the street to everyday residents. The police department itself even came out and said that we have a list of 128 risky officers, they called it. And we know that this list is not even complete because we have lawyers in the trenches that are doing the work, like the good folks at the Goodman, Hurwitz, and James law firm that have deposed police officers, that have held people to task, and they know that that list is way longer than 128. But that's what they want to give us, we'll take it. Through organizing the great work of the Coalition for Police Transparency and Accountability, we are demanding accountability be seen by those 128 risky officers. And when they say risky, what they're saying is at any given moment in time, if you have an interaction with one of these police officers, you are liable to suffer from any sorts of abuse, constitutional violations. The civilian complaints is out the roof. And what does DPD do? They say, hey, they're out there. That's it. It is upon us. So make sure you pick up one of those flyers that are in the back from CPTA. We are going to demand accountability, get those police officers off the street. Dr. King called for a radical redistribution of political and economic power. He advocated for a society in which everyone has their basic needs met. He was a proponent of the guaranteed basic income and fair housing. Dr. King also told us this, that we must rapidly begin the shift from a thing-oriented society to a person-oriented society. As a prison industrial complex abolitionist, that is what we're fighting for at the Detroit Justice Center, along with many others in the streets. We want clean water, fresh food, quality health care, affordable housing. That list goes on and on and on. We're dealing with an affordable housing crisis right now in the city. The Black home ownership has declined drastically due specifically to racist practices. Folks are fighting the jacked up rental prices in order to stay in their homes. And we have grassroots organizations like Detroit Action, Michigan Liberation, Detroit Will Breathe, folks who are organizing people, that are educating people about their rights, and then reiterating that we do not have to put up with this. At DJC, the Detroit Justice Center, we seek to put the power in the hands of the people. And that's why we're advocating for funding community land trusts. So when everyone is yelling and shouting for land back, best believe we mean that. We are taking the land back. Our government is financially backing and supporting the genocide of the Palestinian people. And they thought they will be able to get away with it this time like they've done so many times before, feeding us lies, half-truths. But what they didn't realize is that we can see with our own eyes today the atrocities that are going on. What they didn't count on was the global solidarity that would be on display. This has been the shining light in this dire situation. It has fueled me and it has empowered me, because this is exactly what Dr. King was doing. This was what Brother Malcolm X was doing. This is what all the revolutionary leaders that were taking from us too young, this is what they knew, and this is what we now know. Our freedom is tied to one another. And once we have global solidarity, we will get free. There are others who are just now becoming politicized in this moment. Let us embrace them. Let us not question where they've been, but let us welcome them so that we can take this thing down. Myself, as a Black woman, as a mother, I know that I will not be free until Palestine is free. The tools that are being used to obfuscate the fact that the Israeli government is committing a genocide are the same tools that have been used and that will continue to be used against us by our government, by the oppressors. Whether it's Cop City in Atlanta, the treatment of Dr. Claudine Gay, or ShotSpotter, and facial recognition here in Detroit, we must be vigilant, y'all. We must organize. This is how we get free. We organize against these repressive tactics. Again, the global solidarity and the organizing tactics that we employ is going to free the Palestinian people, is going to free the Congolese people, is going to free the Sudanese people, and it's going to free every single oppressed people all over the globe. So on today, as we honor the legacy of the great Dr. Martin Luther King, do not fall prey to the sentiments of we must turn the other cheek and we must be pacifists and we must sit back and let the oppressors do what they do. That is a blatant whitewashing and misinterpretation of Dr. King. That is not the King that I'm up here representing, and it should not be the one that you take home with you. We are here honoring the man that was anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist, that was for fair housing, basic minimum wage, that was for reproductive rights for Black folks and all folks, that was willing to go to bat for the people in Vietnam. That is the legacy that we hold up today. As much as they laud King today, do not be confused. They hated Dr. King. After the March on Washington, the FBI deemed him the most dangerous Negro in America. That's the type of man I want to be associated with. When Dr. King and all the great people, allies included, marched on Washington, they were coming to collect a debt that was owed to Black people. That check that America wrote that came back insufficient funds, guess what? We are still here at their neck and we are coming to collect our check. It is our duty to fight for our freedom. We must take the work that Dr. King laid, that our ancestors started, and we must run with it. We are still owed that check. As much as the burden is heavy, we shall overcome, and we're gonna do it together. Educate, organize, empower. Educate, organize, empower. Let's get free, y'all. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Nancy Parker. Director of the Detroit Justice Center. At this time, we'd like to bring this.
Okay, we're going to bring this part of the program to an end. I want to thank my co-chair, Aurora Harris, all the great speakers. We were going to march, but we did a poll, and they said it feels like 4 degrees below zero outside. So if we have something better, though. We have a warm meal that's going to be served downstairs from the Detroit Wobbly Kitchen. All you have to do is start lining up over here in this right lane. And of course, you can eat and drink with us. Just to say that we're not going to march because it's 4 below zero outside, but we have something better, and that's a meal from the Detroit Wobbly Kitchen. It's in the basement. All you have to do is line up over here, and we have a free meal for everyone. But thank you so much for coming out. The Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, President Sean Fain, Attorney Nancy Parker, Brother Russ Ballant, all the artists, Ben Will, Wardell Montgomery, and all. So please join us downstairs for a community meal. Thank you so much for coming out.